System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' inner city left.
This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Today is Tuesday, October 7th. I am Amin TMK alongside Amoja, Little Tanky Sumler, and our very special guest, Denzel Caldwell. Denzel, hello. Thank you so much for being on the show, family. How are you doing today?
So I'm feeling great. Just came from my MMA workouts, feeling good, training is what I love doing. So I'm glad to be here.
Man, that's lovely, man. I've been trying to, when we talk about having a praxis, what leftism looks like and trying to move through this world in an intelligent way, understanding that safety is something that you have to provide for yourself, and then your tribe, you know what I'm saying? And that as a basis for community. I think that's something that's lost in a lot of leftist circles because there's still this community will protect us without the understanding of like disenfranchised communities have never been protected. Like people protect you from us, right? For whatever reasons, but like in your estimation, what does a leftist owe to themselves, to their tribe, and their society at large as it relates to self-defense?
Yeah, so I think from a materialist analysis, right? Like we talk about protection and the need for us to build power in a way to challenge like the status quo and whatnot, but what does that mean in practice, right? Like, I think, like, when we talk about things like training, for self-defense, community defense, I feel like that, and I say this all the time, even when I'm training folks, like, that self-defense, community defense is a form of, like, self-determination and bodily autonomy, right? A lot of people talk about this thing, but what does that actually look like? The idea that communities or even, like, certain individuals that are part of organizations can like say, hey, if somebody tries to violate me, I can stop that, right? That's material as fuck. You know what I mean? Like there's no way to out-argue that. Like I can stop the thing, And so I feel like training, like, in forms of self and community defense, no matter what that looks like, is a very like real and material way for us to actually like transform society, right? Or to sort of practice our ideological project, you know what I mean? Which is honestly why I think it's in the last, I would say 40 to 50 years, this aspect of our movement has been surgically removed from our spaces, right? I mean, I'm just going to be real. Like there's some spaces that, they might ideologically align with us. But then when you bring up the notion of training, then like people act like, you're from another planet. And it's like, like this.
That's what the police do. The police will protect us. You know what I'm saying? It's like.
Or even worse. They'll be like, oh, yeah, like we know you and a couple other folks do it. So like y'all will do all the things. And it's just like, like. Dog, like I ain't trying to be no target. You know what I mean? Like I want all of us. The power comes is when all of us do this thing in the way that we can do it, right? Not just some people. I mean, and ironically, you're just recreating the sort of like same dynamics that you have with police when you do that stuff. Like that's not ideologically consistent. So it's just like, for me, I think it's a very real way to hold us accountable to the politics that we claim to champion and want to like use to transform society.
I want to apologize real quick, Denzel. I meant to read your bio in the beginning. We were having such a good conversation before we went on air. I totally forgot. So please let me apologize. Let me just read this bio real quick, everybody. Denzel Caldwell is a martial artist, firearms, stop the bleed instructor, popular educator, economist, and community organizer. Among several other formations, he serves as the sergeant at arms of the Middle Tennessee Black Gun Club, founded in 2020 following the George Floyd uprisings. MTBGC is a member organization of the Black Alliance for Peace. Born and raised in Nashville, Denzel seeks to resurrect and strengthen Black defense practices throughout Black and colonized communities, especially in the U.S. South. And I just wanted to say that because it's important for us just to acknowledge we're here to bring receipts, people who will live through things and done things. And it's something that we talk about often is armed resistance being just really one of the most effective, if not the only effective way.
It's a human right that's guaranteed by the United Nations. You know, as mellow an organization, as mediocre and rhetoric driven an organization as it gets, and even the United Nations inherently, you know, talks about the right for organized struggle against oppressive situations. You know, to the point that Denzel is bringing up earlier, you know, this is one of the great. This plays out geopolitically as well. This is one of the great question marks that hangs over a nation like Venezuela, right? When Hugo Chavez came in, it was originally a very colonized type country still. Like all of the military, anyone could join. But when you talk about the officer corps, that tended to only be the people that were from the aristocratic Spanish families, you know, which creates kind of an inherent disconnect from the indigenous people that are the native people of the land. So when Hugo Chavez comes in, first off, he makes it now so that anyone can join the officer corps, but mandates a certain level of training to everyone in the country. And so, like, though there is a regular Venezuelan army, you know, that can be measured by the normal metrics, it's very hard to get a feel for what is the size of the irregular army. And that only comes from a community of training, a culture of training, understanding that ultimately it is on you to keep you free, to keep you safe. Like, you know, I don't meaninglessly like mock the concept of waiting for police, but like, let's imagine a world where there was complete lack of politic as it relates to a police force, right? The bottom line is the very nature of policing is meant to be reactive as opposed to proactive in the best scenarios. That is to say, it cannot stop crime. It can only research what happened and again, in the most apolitical situation, seek to find a recompense or justice for the crimes that did happen. When it comes to prevention, that is always the mandate of the person themselves. You have to protect you. You know what I'm saying? So back to you, Mr. Dalal. I know you've got some wonderful questions. You're muted.
I was locked in, you know how it goes. I just wanted to give Denzel an opportunity if you wanted to respond or say anything just about what Tanky was saying.
No, to that point. And this is free game for like some of our comrades who may not be in these spaces, but one of the biggest things that they push in the firearm world, which obviously we know is predominantly right wing, you know, full of cops and things of that sort. The first thing that they say is police are not here to save you. Like, I like, this is like, it really is a bit mind blowing how some of our comrades in the effort to push even the line of abolition, right? Don't you see this as an organizing opportunity? Like, these folks are like, hey, to Tanky's point, like, police are not there to stop a crime. They're there to react to their armed, glorified secretaries. Right? Like, you know, they're there to, you know, collect evidence at best, you know, collect evidence, figure out what happened, get suspects, all these things. And so a lot of those spaces, they're like, hey, if we understand this, then we have to create like systems and training practices and training methods that will allow us to actually stop the thing that is happening to us, right? They always refer to people who are training as the first line of defense. And to me, that is one of the things that, again, I feel like has been absolutely surgically removed from the left. And because, I mean, if anything else, we should be grounded in that reality too. Like if we understand these forces as reactive, we are going to have to be our first line of defense, because if we take our politics seriously, we are going against the grain. So we're going to have to create like ironclad systems within community that are going to be able to respond to medical needs, issues of intercommunal violence, like issues of like mental health. Like we're going to have those things. And so like when we're talking about community defense, it encompasses all of these things. And it requires us to be real about what we are able to do and what we can't do and how we need to fill that gap. You know what I mean? And I think sometimes, or no, often, again, due to a variety of factors, like we've been so removed from that tradition that like trying to resurrect it feels like somebody's coming from another planet, you know. But again, if we're taking our study seriously, our political education, and we're looking at our political traditions here, accurately, our elders and our ancestors who did this work will tell you the same thing. They're like, look, healing justice or community defense isn't just some pie in the sky abstract nonsense. It means, hey, do you know stop the bleed? Do you know what to do when you are dealing with a number of reactionaries that pop up on the scene? Do you know what to do when someone's going through a mental health episode and we know we don't want the state to come down on this community because they will? Like, these are just very like matter of fact things. Like, and those are the gaps we got to fill. So, I mean, that's spot on.
I think about this, right, as it relates to intersectionality as an intellectual practice, right? People will have the understanding of being one of the most disadvantaged populations, and then not make the corollary understanding of where that means you will sit in the security architecture, right, of this community that you're describing. So, you're describing that you're all out of. Think about intersectionality as a something that's looking at how many shades out of spec you are, right? The mainstream is the spectrum, right? But you might be out of that spec because you're Black, or you have an ethnicity that is non-European, or a sexuality that is not considered the right. The further away from that spec you get, the further away from protection you are, right? Like the mainstream is the thing that the status quo is there to protect. So you'll understand that you're out of spec, and then not make the corollary jump to understanding that this now mandates you yourself as the means of this first line of protection, because the society in and of itself does not see you as something to protect, but instead something to be protected from, which makes you in danger inherently just through the identities that you claim for yourself, right? Like, I think that this is the problem with over intellectualizing these things sometimes, and why you have to look at revolutionary methodology, right? Like, not to say like, go fight, but understand that fights will come, and you have to know what to do when those things happen, and there's so many levels you can take it, and this is why, again, Denzel, you're such a great person to have on here. Can you talk about some of the other things that you train in? You're a martial artist, you're a firearms instructor, right? Like, if you could just give a little bit of background as to what you do and where you came up with it.
Yeah, so I mean, like, as you said, like, I started off doing martial arts. Like, one of my base systems is a family style of Kung Fu called Black Lotus Kung Fu. And we also train Moyat lineage of Wing Chun. And so, like, a lot of my understanding of self and community defense comes from that practice, right? And so over time, as I started to teach, adults and kids and stuff like that, I was like, look, I'm in the United States, 21st century, guns are a thing. I can't ignore it. You know what I mean? Like, that's just a part of reality, regardless of how folks will feel about it. So I feel like I have an ethical responsibility to at least learn how they work, right? And so I went, took classes, and, got my permit, all that stuff like that. But then I was like, you know what? Like, actually, this is a critical aspect of the martial arts, because martial arts is not just this empty hand or even non-projectile thing. I need to like add this to my training, and so I was like, I have to do it well enough to teach it. And so I just started going from there. That's eventually how I ran into who would later be my president. Shout out to Madam President Tanea. And then eventually we started the gun club, following the George Floyd uprising. But like from there, like, as I started to learn more about community defense, self-defense, things of that sort, my understanding expanded. And so my training expanded. So like that looked like going and learning Stop the Bleed and becoming an instructor in that, learning wilderness first aid. And for those who don't know wilderness first aid, that's first aid training when the injury or the emergency medical services are more than an hour away, or what they refer to as like the golden hour. So yeah, you might be in the wilderness, but you don't have to be in the wilderness for that. If you live in predominantly Black and colonized communities, the emergency medical services are not coming quick, right? Especially in times of disaster and things like that. So wilderness first aid is important. I've done a variety of other things. Pepper spray can teach that. Getting into de-escalation, conflict navigation. My partner actually does a lot of work in transformative justice. So like getting into like those type of practices, like just really trying to be as holistic as possible. I mean, as it relates to like my ideological tendency, right? And so like, it's expanding. Ham radio. I eventually want to get into like map reading and things like that, and the list goes on. But like, these are just very real skills that like anybody, would want to learn if they want to like be able to be self-determined people. Like, and if we look anywhere across the planet, folks, especially folks engaged in revolutionary struggle, see these things as necessary. It's not a question of, well, I should, I don't know how I feel about firearms. It's like, no, I'm being bombed. I have to do this in order to protect myself, my people, or things like that, in order to eat. You know what I mean? I have to learn these things. And so, I think this is just one of those moments where those of us within the empire are going to have to like get real about like what this requires for us to successfully transform, global conditions, and particularly within the empire, and like take these things seriously. I mean, for me, again, like my reflection, my training is just like my sort of commitment to taking my politics seriously. Like if I say that, Marxist Leninist and like, I understand what that means, especially within the context of the empire. Like, I gotta train this shit, or you know what I'm saying? Like, again, my predecessors saw this as a necessity. What makes me any different, or any organization that I'm a part of any different, especially now in this stage that we're in, as far as like geopolitics are concerned?
I find it funny too, right? Because I think the internet has this wonderful desensitizing effect, right? Where there's what exists on the internet, and it's very, no matter what you see on there, essentially it's genteel in that it's words that you're reading or something that someone is saying, right? No matter what's being said. In the context of that, right, you think of civilized as tame. And I say that only to say, to your point, right, you're in the Mid-South, Tennessee. I lived all over the South, right? Civilization isn't even the only dangerous thing that exists for me in my world. You know what I'm saying? Like, not even joking. I always say the bear don't give a fuck about your superior argument, man. If I'm in the woods and it's a bear, you're gonna be like, hey, Mr. Bear, I'm a self-actualized human being. I have thoughts, kids that love me, right? Like, none of that shit is going to matter. You know what I'm saying? Like, you live in a world where you have to be able to provide your own defense for any number of things that happen. Even if that isn't your day to day, we live in a world where the extraordinary happens every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, did you have something you wanted to add, Denzel?
That was it.
All right, let me jump in. I'm going to ask this to you guys. So last week we lost Assata Shakur, and something that she said is white people's fear of black people with guns will never cease to amaze me, probably because they think about what they would do if they were in our places, especially the police. We have done so much dirt to black people. Their guilty conscience tells them to be afraid. When black people seriously organize and take up arms to fight for our liberation, there will be a lot of white people who would drop dead from no other reason than their own guilt and fear. There is something I think that happens when, revolutionaries pass. There is always sort of this liberal whitewashing. And you mentioned the right wing always sort of being the dominant space for like the pro-gun movement or whatever it may be, which, again, the NRA, all those places are just, racist aspects of the system, locking out black people and POCs from gun ownership and things of that nature. And you kind of saw this whitewashing a little bit of Assata. Can you talk about your thoughts on Assata? I saw on your Instagram you had posted about her. Obviously, anybody in this community is probably going to do that. It's about her, and also just her legacy on the aspect of armed liberation within the black community and really globally.
Yeah, I mean, well, first off, rest in peace. Rest in power to Assata Shakur, sending out much love and condolences and solidarity to the Shakur family, first and foremost. I think that Assata is emblematic of, as we were saying earlier, when we take our politics seriously, right? I think one of the most beautiful things about Assata's life, even though people have ways of misremembering revolutionaries, there is a certain aspect of Assata that's unco-optable. There's no way you can talk about her life and not talk about the Cuban Revolution. Or there's no way you can talk about her life and not talk about the Black Liberation Army, right? Or the new African politics that came with her, right? And I mean, she talked directly to liberals about themselves, and made it very clear, in ways to where, I ain't got to go back and forth with liberals when they try to defang her legacy. All I got to do is let her talk to them. You know what I mean? And so I think as it pertains to armed struggle, again, she had such a solid materialist analysis and praxis that she was like, this is a necessary component of revolutionary struggle, and such a necessary component in a way to where it's to pretend that it's not is counter-revolutionary, but also it's not grounded in reality, right? If we're trying to even if we didn't hold the politics that Assata holds, right? Let's say we're some, true believer progressive, we don't, when the state comes down on any sort of effort to shift the status quo, they're airing the room out. They're not just looking at the revolutionaries, they're also going after the progressives who don't quite have oppositional attitudes toward capitalism, white supremacy in the ways that we do, right? And so for me, when we think of the legacy of Assata and her outlook and her practice as it relates to armed struggle, it's a form of accountability for us, to be honest. What are we doing? You know what I mean? And in many ways, I'll be honest, it's a bit of an indictment on our current formations. Assata, again, all love to the Cuban Revolutionary Project, but it was what were we doing to where we didn't make conditions such that Assata, if she chose, to come back, and then by extension, what is it such that our movement has not freed her comrades? Right? Because one of the first things that I had shared, like, because it just hit me in the chest when, after, as we were talking about Assata, like, yo, we need to all get behind the Jericho movement and those working to free our political prisoners.
Can you speak a little bit more about the Jericho movement?
Yeah. So for those who don't know, the Jericho movement is an organization that's dedicated to liberating our political prisoners behind bars. For those who don't know, the United States does have political prisoners behind bars, many revolutionaries, whether we're talking about the Black Panther Party, Black Liberation Army, AIM, the list goes on, right?
Yeah, Peltier just got out.
You know what I mean? Like, just got out, right? And like, in many ways, you can measure the seriousness and the potency of liberatory struggle or like formations or ecosystem by how they're treating those who are in prison, right? And we're just talking about like revolutionaries and freedom fighters from previous iterations of movements of struggle, decades ago, who are still behind bars. That's not even getting into some comrades now who've been struggling alongside us that have been locked up. You know what I mean? Like, and so, like, for me, like that is just another, I would say, next to training, like to defend ourselves individually, collectively, even as organizations, I think like the commitment to like freeing our people from political imprisonment or the lack thereof really is something that has been surgically removed largely from our ecosystem.
And that conversation isn't even something that's in the consciousness, right? Like, to your point, I think about, like, even for the people that are not quote unquote revolutionary, but represent so-called Black excellence, right? Like, where was pardons are bought every day. That's just a matter of American justice, right? Pardons are bought. Where is the Black bourgeois class buying those pardons? You know what I'm saying? Like, affecting that type of, like, even if you're not that radical person, but you've done good through all the miracles of what it means to do good in the United States of America, instead you have a $500,000 check for, the Democratic vice president candidate right. But never that understanding of, well, we're all going to put our $500,000 together and put together a $20 million, whatever, and like
down to the courthouse and bailing people out, which is something that Young Thug was doing earlier too.
These things happen in powerful communities, and it shows the lack of power. It shows that wealth is not the same thing as proximity to power. I think a direct corollary for this would be Jonathan Pollard, who was imprisoned as a political prisoner for spying on Israel, on the United States for Israel. Israeli billionaires got together, bought that, made sure he was transferred to Israel. He served some time, but that man lived the rest of his days in Israel, right? Like, where were the American Black POC, Black excellence class stepping up for people like Assata? I think that's a wonderful, to say nothing of,
and I think in so many ways, I think that's directly connected to our again, surgical separation from our community defense struggles, like our community defense practices, right? Or traditions. That's a part of community defense. Being able to get our comrades or elders out of being politically imprisoned, right? Like we can't do, like, I'll never forget. It's seared in my memory when Dr. Matulu Shakur was released, and he got on the mass call, the Black Men Bill call, and he was just like, I waited a long time. Like that the silence, that, like, yo, it's an indictment. What were we doing? and I'm including myself in that. Like, what were we doing such that, like, our folks are only getting out because they're 2 steps away from death? You know what I mean? Because what are we missing? You know what I mean? Yes, absolutely. We're under a 60-year counterinsurgency. Like, I'm like so clear-eyed when it comes to that. And also, like, in the midst of that, what are we doing to regroup, to rebuild, like, to address current conditions? You know what I mean? Such that we have an answer. Like, to me, I feel like it would be more, what's the word? Valiant, respectable, if we were attempting to have an answer that didn't work, maybe was ineffective for whatever reason, than to have no answer at all. Right? And I think in so many ways, like, alongside the passing of Assata Shakur, even how we're looking at the Palestinian Liberation Forces and how they're responding to the current moment. And honestly, the way we respond to that liberation front has a direct mirroring, like, sort of directly mirrors where we really are in terms of our own liberation front, like on this side of combating the empire, right? Because, like, if you got all this smoke for the liberation front on that theater, that says a lot about what you're doing here at home. It does. Like, because I feel like you feel that same way about working class Black people. Feel like you feel that same way about, like, radical and revolutionary formations here. Like, it's a mirror, and I think that's what one of the many things that makes the question of Palestine so potent, especially in this moment, because it's a mirror. It's a mirror. Like, how you respond in this moment directly mirrors where you are.
I think that's a great comparison, and this is something that Amin and I have talked about a lot, as he is a Palestinian American and I'm an African American Jew, ironically. The Black political class capture, right, which also should be levers to affect changes for people like Assata and the political prisoner class, right, where that's completely devoid from their politics. The only calorie you can find for this in the world is the Arab street versus the Arab government conversation, right? Like, the way the average Jordanian feels about the Palestinian conflict is quite different from King Abdullah's actual position. You know what I'm saying, right? Because they become this protected class, which goes to the heart of the anti-revolutionary nature of the Black electorate, the Black political class, right? Whereas you should be a shield, not even the first line of defense. You should be like the 5th or 6th line of defense, way up. That is the whole point of having political power. But it's the power of the individual as opposed to the power of the person that represents the collective, which in and of itself is supposed to be the Republican ideal. This person is the speaking voice for these people who have elected them. I am their representative voice, and that does not happen. It doesn't happen in the American political class. It's not happening in the Arab political class. It's hard to see the ways that, say, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia would be able to relate in any real way to what happens on the street in Gaza.
Yeah, and just great points, everybody. I want to say there are so many political prisoners here in the United States. Obviously, you mentioned that, Denzel, and just so many prisoners in the West Bank. We saw the large debate about whether it was okay to rape prisoners. I know it's just such a difficult and, intense situation, but I mean, that's just what we deal with domestically here in the United States and geopolitically. Mm-hmm. And, me and Emoja talk about this all the time. Emoja, he made a great point not too long ago, talking about all the different, classes in America. And, the class that has it the worst is the carceral class. And America has one of the
and it's not even close. And this isn't even something that's represented in intersectional diagrams.
Yeah, no, great point. And we look at obviously those who are political prisoners, but also people who are just wrongly accused or misrepresented or whatever it may be. The whole, Dave Chappelle joke of, just sprinkle a little crack on them. It's just a whole funny thing that has to permeate throughout, this culture, just because we know how, rigged those courts are. We know that disproportionately Black people are incarcerated at incredible rates. The only demographic that's even close is indigenous Americans, but they have a much smaller percentage. And you talk about like these political prisoners and Mumia and everybody that's still sort of locked up, and those innocent people as well who are there. And anyway, for the most part, I don't believe that prisons should exist. We're abolitionists here, but it is pretty messed up to see that people spend their lives in this carceral system that is incredibly violent, dehumanizing, and the Palestinians are also facing it as well. And we talked about this before, I think, when we had Dr. CBS. Just these connections that we have, in terms of just the shared struggle, and again, they don't. The whole conversation surrounding the watermelon people and all these different ways that they utilize to sort of divide us in our class consciousness, But at the end of the day, I think we can all kind of look at sort of the carceral class as one of the most deeply affected and disenfranchised communities in the world. I guess that's not really a question, but I just wanted to kind of get your response on that, and sort of also to Tanky's point about bail and the ways that we can kind of come together as a larger community and just kind of help each other get through this incredibly rigged, racist, white supremacist system.
Yeah, I mean, to the point about the Black political class, I mean, this is just all the more reason why everyone should have some degree of class consciousness, right? Because like historically, we understand that to be part of the buffer class, right? Like you would think Black folks, here in the United States, when we reach that level of power, it would be dope to have that level of class consciousness such that when we get someone in office, they're able to, actually be a critical component of building that type of sort of like working class power within our communities. Utilizing, though limited, this current structure, but reality says otherwise, right? Like maybe you could say that there was an element of that post Reconstruction to some degree. Right.
Yeah, that's an absolute example. The Black Republicans post Reconstruction, right? These are the guys that are literally being hung by the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan is invented to literally murder that class of Black politician, right? There's no line that connects you from those guys to like the Cori Bushes, you know what I'm saying, of today, or Kamala Harris. Like, there's literally no connection to them whatsoever, because these guys are not toothless. Like, those were people that were pushing Reconstruction bills that talked about, reparations. They talked about just so many things, so much. They make you believe that Reconstruction was about the right to vote, but there were Black people that were in Congress during Reconstruction.
Yeah, I mean, they were pushed. I mean, like strengthening unions, like it was like almost pseudo-socialist to some degree. I don't think they necessarily explicitly held that ideological line, but like, I mean, there were conditions for that, but Capital responded. They wanted to smash even the potential of something like that, right? Because I mean, we experienced what we experienced at that time was like a massive. And I forget who, I think it was Du Bois that described, Black folks participating in the Civil War as a general strike. But like, I mean, we experienced one of the largest general strikes in U.S. history, right? And we were on the verge of reshaping our relationship to production, right? And Capital just was swift and said, "Hey, we're gonna have to reform this in a way to where we maintain these relationships." And so, I mean, and what came with that? There was a buffer class of Black folks that maintained the relationships, like this current order, right? I mean, I was reading not too long ago I think it's The Defeat of Black Power. They were talking about the National Black Political Convention in the 70s, and just like how you had these warring factions between nationalists and some other revolutionaries and other tendencies, and like this Black political class, right? They rode on the Black Power sort of wave to get into office. And yeah, you were representing a constituent of Black folks, but y'all didn't want to say shit about Palestine. Y'all didn't want to say shit about redistribution policies that made sense. Like, yeah, okay, maybe compared to now, right, they may have been a little more, maybe a half a step left of the current Black political class when it came to foreign policy. But like, to what extent? Like, you went out of your way to ruin the potency of the National Black Convention only for the next presidential election to be given to Nixon at the time, right? It didn't work, and so like if we take that history seriously, we shouldn't have like some of our revolutionaries, even some of our current organizers, in the same conversations as the Kamalas or the great de-radicalizer Obama, or like many others, who sit in that political class. Like, they stand in opposition, and then if we understand that, we should also be skeptical of even some of the talking heads who conflate these groups of people, right? We have to, and again, it just goes back to the point of having a clear class consciousness, right? And understanding colonialism, like, and neocolonialism, and how it works and how it appears, within the U.S. context in this regard.
I got one more question for you guys. Again, the intensity of living in America is so crazy, and anywhere where the American hegemonic violence affects. But yeah, we saw about 2 weeks ago a college freshman black man in Mississippi, Trey Reed, was found hanged. There has been a lot of speculation surrounding that. Colin Kaepernick, the former San Francisco 49er quarterback, blackballed by the league. He is paying for a second autopsy. There's some rumors that there may be blunt trauma. We're not exactly sure. They're rumors for now. But as many people said when they found that out, is that Black people usually don't hang themselves. And there was obviously a huge backlash, especially in a world where we all know that whatever is happening in terms of the police department and wherever those autopsies are happening, they can't be trusted, and it is unfortunate to have to live in a world where you have to have a second autopsy done. There's obviously people want to move on, but this is not obviously the first incident this year, and these things continue to happen. And there's always sort of this idea that, oh, well, things are getting better. This is the thing you were talking about with Obama, just the great de-radicalizer, like, oh, we're moving past this, but obviously this is continuing. People say, hey, it's ramped up by, Charlie Kirk or whatever it may be. But, Trump obviously is a huge igniting force for all these types of things. I guess, obviously difficult conversation, but your thoughts on that, and sort of, again, just how important it is to be able to defend yourself. I know you are a mixed martial artist, and you were also saying on your page, it's kind of very difficult to pick a martial art that's like foolproof for you to be able to defend yourself. But just can you respond to that and talk a little bit just how important it is really for people to be able to keep something on them or just be able to protect themselves? Because at any time, something like this can happen.
Yeah, again, like if we go from a sort of international legal perspective, as Tangy said earlier, like the UN and all their, rhetorical ballooning, or like it is a right for oppressed people to defend themselves, right? And we could frame that however we want to look at that, whether we're talking about colonized people, working class people under capitalism. We have a right to defend ourselves by definition, regardless of how useful or how much teeth international law has. So there's that. If we want to use our various resistance traditions across the ideological spectrum, folks literally fought to keep themselves alive, whether you're talking about formerly enslaved, whether you're talking about working class coal miners who were engaged in literal wars with the state, and indigenous folks, the list goes on, right? And so like with that sort of tradition and current reality in mind, I think that when we look at situations such as the Trey Reed, and I believe there was another student or young Black person that was found hung as well, it just reiterates the importance of training, not only as individuals, but more importantly, as a community, right? Because let's say that it is a suicide, right? Even then, we lived in conditions such that young man did not have the resources to be able to deal with his issues. We live in a very capitalist, anti-Black society such that they felt that was preferable over continuing life, if that were the case. But, again, our collective memory tells us that Black people don't hang themselves, right? And so either way, no matter what happens, it speaks to a larger need for community defense such that whether our folks need those type of resources to be able to navigate any sort of mental health issues as it relates to dealing with this capitalist anti-Black hellhole, or it's a matter of racial terror, of white supremacist terrorism, right? We have to be able to have systems and practices in place to where we're able to deal with those things. But to the point specifically about defending ourselves, again, it's a practice of self-determination. It's self-determination in action, right? Or looking at it from a reproductive justice lens, it's bodily autonomy in practice, right? And in so many ways, everybody training is a direct affront to these many systems of oppression, right? So no, people who are socially conditioned to be men should not just be the only one training. The people who are able-bodied should be the only ones. Shouldn't be the only ones training, right? And the list goes on, right? When we talk about these different sort of identities or class positions that we have, it's a practice that allows us to both interpersonally and collectively challenge these various forms of violence that we deal with on the daily, collectively, right? And then just more importantly, and I'm pulling from Daruba bin Wahad when he was talking about the prerequisites for building revolutionary movements. Revolutionary movements or even progressive movements aren't led by victims, right? They're led by people who take on a certain level of self-determination, a certain level of agency, who see themselves as a self-determined people, as a nation, depending on your context, right? What so have you. And they seek to actualize building the conditions that reflect how they see themselves, right? And so part of us actually saying, hey, we do need to make training armed, unarmed defense, collective defense, self-defense. The thing says that, no, we do not allow ourselves to be subject to these various forms of violence that have been constructed over centuries, such that it renders our lives disposable, right? It says instead that, we are asserting that we should live as long as we are able to live without the disruption of capitalist white supremacist violence, patriarchal violence, right? And so, like, for us, like, making that decision to take on that training is critical. And if anything, if we're looking at the work that we're doing, no matter what front we're fighting, if we take our analysis seriously and we take our work seriously, especially within the empire, then that shouldn't even be a question. There shouldn't be a question of whether or not we should be practicing self or community defense. Of course you should, because we understand that we live in an empire that, through a variety of means, is trying to take us out. And so we should have an answer for that. And we should be able to, again, as we were talking about the practice of self-defense being a practice of self-determination, bodily autonomy, you should be able to say, hey, no, this is not going to happen, in whatever context that is.
Man, no, exactly that. I mean, it's so hard to imagine a world where a Black person wants to kill themselves by way of hanging, because it's just so much cultural fruit that's associated with that, all the way up to, Billie Holiday's famous song, Strange Fruit. So much violence has been done to the people in America that descended from the people that were enslaved. And that violence is ritualistic in a way that it is abhorrent to the culture. Like, Black men commit suicide. They're under incredible stress. They're incredible pressure. They're one of the most predated demographics. When I say predated, I mean preyed upon by predators, right? They suffer predation. They do kill themselves. This is just not a way Black men kill themselves out. Like, of all the ways that people do it, especially down south, I mean, it's just not, it buggers the mind to imagine that a person goes through all of the effort to hang themselves, but they don't go through the effort to send a note. There's no call. Oh, I always wanted to be with you, but it did. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, I can never even intelligently, not for 1 second, assume when I find a Black male body swinging from a tree. Suicide is the literal last thought that comes to my mind. And if we're intelligent people, there's no one that should ever believe that in America. Like, no one that is from American culture should have any doubt that this is just not something that really happens.
Thanks.
Good sir, you are muted.
I was saying some good stuff, but maybe I guess the universe will never know. I just wanted to again say I think we can leave it right there for today. I want to give a big thank you again, Denzel. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really hope you come back. You gave us a lot of food for thought, and I think that these conversations are important. We focus on geopolitics, but what we have to do in our communities, Keita the Muscle, who's like sort of the third member of our group, is always talking about talk to your neighbors, bake some cookies, go over there and say hello, and build that community in your area, not just an online community. So I think that was just some great food for thought. Real quickly, I just want to give a shout out to our podcast listeners. We're available everywhere you find podcasts, everywhere, y'all. You got a podcast place and you search us, you will find it. I'm so confident in that. If you're on YouTube, like and comment, subscribe, all those good things. And obviously we have a Patreon. You guys can check that out. I'll put that in the description. But with that being said, again, much appreciation, much love to you, Denzel. And
Denzel, tell us where we can find your work.
Bet. So you can find what you see below in my subtitle. That's my personal IG. Feel free to follow that. You can also find the work for our gun club on Instagram. It's MTBGC. If you want to find us on Instagram, we're also on Facebook and Twitter. If you're in the Middle Tennessee area, holla at us. We got classes monthly. We teach, gun safety. We start off with safety first. Everyone needs to learn how to be safe, whether you want to shoot a gun or not. If you never want to touch a gun, everybody, especially in the United States, to learn how to safely handle a firearm. So we offer those. We offer home and personal defense. We'll be offering a number of other things. If you're in the Middle Tennessee area, please come through. Even if you want to travel, we would love to see you. Sometimes we travel. We offer private classes. We're rolling out a curriculum that's going to include martial arts and stop the bleed. So be out on the lookout for that. Again, we're on Facebook, Middle Tennessee Black Gun Club, Instagram at MIDTNBGC. We're on Twitter as well. Just come holler at us and we'll be here. And I'd love to come back to the show. Love the show. Thank y'all for having me. Feel free to hit me up whenever you want me to come back. I'll be more than willing to do it.
Yeah, and we're going to put all of that in the description as well. So, people can just go ahead and click. Tanky, anything you wanted to say before we get out of here, man? Man,
stay safe. Love your neighbor. Bring them some cookies.
For Mojalo Tanky Sumler, for Denzel Caldwell, I'm Amin TMK. This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Peace.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' Inner City Left.